The stories you're about to hear were submitted by real people who claim these events actually happened. Some are disturbing, some are terrifying, and some are almost impossible to explain. So before we begin, lock your doors, turn off the lights, and prepare yourself for tonight's true horror stories. I started dating a girl named Alex a little over a year ago. We met through friends at a party, and things moved pretty quickly after that. She was really cool, and she laughed at all of my stupid jokes. At the time, I was still living with two roommates from college, and she just moved into a new apartment with a guy named Ned, who she didn't know at all. She told me she found the place through an online posting, so was just taking a chance. Rent in our area was ridiculous, so splitting a 2-bedroom apartment seemed like the only realistic option. She said the landlord described Ned as quiet and respectful, and honestly that turned out to be pretty accurate, at least on the surface. The first time I went over there, I barely even saw him. Alex opened the door, and when she was showing me around, I noticed a sliver of light coming from under the bedroom door. I could hear muffled game sounds and somebody talking, probably to someone in a game. Alex knocked once to say hi to him, and a few seconds later, the door opened, maybe 6 inches. Ned looked like the kind of guy who stayed inside all day. He was pale, thin, and had messy dark hair, and it looked like he cut himself. He had a wrinkled t-shirt and basketball shorts, and he barely looked at me when he said hello. "Hey," he muttered before going right back into his room. After that, whenever I came over, his door stayed shut. Sometimes I heard him gaming late into the night and yelling at people online, but he almost never came into the living room while I was there. If Alex cooked dinner, he waited until we finished before sneaking into the kitchen. A few times I tried making conversation with him, just to be polite, but it was really forced and awkward. Alex used to joke that he was basically a ghost who paid rent. She didn't dislike him because he never caused problems. He cleaned up after himself, paid his share of everything, and mostly stayed in his room. The only thing she mentioned a couple times was that he seemed awkward around her. She said sometimes she'd catch him staring for a second too long, before quickly looking away. I thought he was probably just socially weird and lonely. Then about 6 months after she moved in, Alex went out one Saturday night with a couple of her friends from work. I was supposed to go too, but I had already worked 6 days that week, and I just wanted to relax. She told me I could stay at the apartment and watch movies while she went out. Then we could just hang out when she got back. I teased her a little bit about abandoning me, and she laughed. But then she left at around 8. Ned's door was shut when she left, but I could hear him talking to his gaming buddies, as usual. I don't think he even knew I was there, because Alex definitely didn't tell him. I was just going to stay in her room, though, so I don't think it mattered. I spent most of the night lying in Alex's bed, watching videos on my laptop. Then, Alex texted me and asked if it was okay for her to stay out later. She said she'd be back about 10 or 10:30, but she was having a good time and she wanted to stay out. I said that was fine, but I told her that I might be asleep before she got in. Then, sometime around midnight, I heard a scratching noise, and it was coming from the wall beside Alex's bed. I took out my headphones and listened carefully. The scratching stopped for a few seconds. Then it started again. It sounded like somebody lightly scraping something against the drywall. I sat up and stared at the wall. There was a big movie poster hanging there that Alex put up when she first moved in. I remember thinking the sound seemed weirdly close. Almost directly behind it, I got off the bed and walked over.
but then the scratching stopped immediately. I pulled the bottom corner of the poster away from the wall, and I saw a tiny hole punched through the drywall at about chest height. Then I leaned closer and saw something inside the hole, and it was the lens of a camera there. There's another little scrape sound from inside the wall, and the camera moved slightly backwards, like somebody pulled it away in panic. I yanked the entire poster down, and there was no question that the drywall had been cut open behind it. I stepped backwards away from the wall and looked towards the bedroom door. I remember thinking Ned might come in any second, and I didn't know what I would say to him if he did. I didn't yell, and I didn't bang on his door. I just grabbed my jacket and left the room as quietly as possible. I stood there for maybe 2 seconds staring at his door, trying to decide what to do. Then I walked straight out the front door and locked it behind me. Once I got into my car, I finally texted Alex. I said, "You need to leave wherever you are and call me right now." She asked what was wrong, and I told her I found a hidden camera in her bedroom, coming from Ned's room. At first, she thought I was joking, but then I sent her a picture of the hole behind the poster, and she called me within seconds. I still can't get over how quiet she got after I explained everything. She stopped talking completely for a few seconds, and then just said, "What?" I told her she couldn't go back there tonight, and she needed to stay with me until we figured out what to do. She left her friends and I picked her up, outside the bar, then took her to my place. I showed her the photo again and she started crying. "What the hell is wrong with him?" she kept saying. At first, Alex wanted to drive over there that night and confront him, but I told her that was a terrible idea. We had no idea how long he'd been doing this, or what else he might have hidden in the apartment. Then, Alex suddenly remembered something. A few months earlier, she changed clothes after her shower and thought she heard something on the other side of the wall. Another time, she woke up in the middle of the night and had a feeling she was being watched. There were all these little things she ignored because they seemed insignificant at the time. By morning, she sobered up and she was furious. We went to the police station together and explained everything. 2 cops came with us back to the apartment later that day, and Ned answered the door looking completely confused. He glanced at Alex, then at me, then at the officers. He denied everything at first, and he said he didn't know what we were talking about. But then the officers searched his room and found a whole setup beside his desk. There were external drives stacked beside his computer, and when they opened his laptop, they found a ton of recordings. There were videos of Alex sleeping, changing clothes, talking on the phone, studying at her desk, and walking around. There were videos of me and Alex together, too, and some of them were months old. It made me feel sick knowing he sat there in the next room watching all of it. Alex completely broke down when the officers told her how much footage existed. One of the cops actually suggested she sit outside because she was hyperventilating. Alex moved in with me for a while so she could look for another apartment. She refused to go back into that room alone, even to get her stuff. I went with her every single time because she was terrified he might somehow come back. The last thing I ever heard about Ned was that he took some kind of plea deal. I don't remember the exact charges, but I think it was voyeurism, unlawful recording, invasion of privacy, or something like that. I never wanted to follow the case closely because it pissed me off too much. Alex and I are still together now, but neither of us is really over what happened. I get paranoid sometimes if I stay somewhere new. If I go to a hotel or Airbnb, I always check for hidden cameras, even though I know that sounds ridiculous. Maybe I'll get over it someday, but it could take a while. I was 27 when this happened, and I had an apartment to myself. Most of my friends were already married or engaged, so I was feeling some pressure to meet someone. I'd been on a few blind dates and awkward setups through coworkers, so I started using dating apps, even though I never thought much would come. There was a guy named Greg that I met on the OkCupid in the first week that I started using it. He worked in corporate logistics for a shipping company and traveled constantly for work. He always seemed to be in a different city every week, and he had a lot of stories about traveling. Other than that, he dressed well and everything about him felt polished. He always texted back quickly. He always knew the right thing to say, and he never seemed annoyed by anything. He had a nice apartment downtown with good furniture and huge windows overlooking the city. The first time I went there, I thought it looked more like a stage condo than somewhere somebody actually lived. There were barely any personal items anywhere. No family pictures, no mail sitting around, and nothing messy. We dated for about 3 months, and most of it felt good. He took me out often and paid for everything. He bought expensive wine, even though I told him I didn't know enough about it to care. He talked about trips we should take together once his work slowed down. My friends kept telling me I finally found a mature guy after years of dating immature men who could barely hold a job. Still, there were little things that bothered me. Sometimes he disappeared for hours and said he was stuck in meetings. Also, sometimes he'd get tense if I asked too many questions about work. And he never introduced me to any family or friends. Every story he told sounded believable in the moment, but later I realized none of them ever had many details. He talked a lot without actually saying much. Then one night, I stayed over at his apartment. The next morning, he left early because he had to meet a client and then catch a flight. I stayed behind for another half hour because I was off from work that day, and he told me to lock up when I left. While I was getting ready to go, somebody knocked at the door. I looked through the peephole and saw a delivery driver holding a package. I opened the door and told him Greg already left. The driver glanced at the package and looked confused. Then he asked, "This one's for Daniel McIntosh." I told him I thought he had the wrong apartment, but then he checked the address again and said that was definitely it. I stood there staring at it long enough that the driver awkwardly asked if I still wanted to accept it. I said, "Sure." I put the package on the counter and just looked at it for a while. When Greg called me later that afternoon, I brought it up casually and asked why somebody else's package was arriving at his apartment. He laughed, nervously, and said that Daniel was kind of a nickname he used sometimes for work stuff. The explanation made no sense at all to me. I might have believed it if he said he let a friend use his address for deliveries, but nobody uses a fake name for packages. I sat on my couch after we hung up, just replaying the conversation in my head. That night, curiosity got the better of me, and I searched the name from the package online. At first, I didn't find much, but eventually I found a public court record site. The age matched him, and then I found an old mugshot. I just stared at my laptop screen in complete disbelief, because it was definitely Greg, only thinner and younger looking. The record showed he'd been convicted of armed robbery and identity fraud a few years earlier. He served several years in prison, and he was only released recently. I kept scrolling through the records, hoping somehow I had the wrong person, but every detail matched. The next morning, Greg texted me like nothing was wrong, but I didn't answer. Then he called a few times throughout the day, and I ignored those too. At first, he sounded normal in the voicemails. He asked if everything was okay and joked that maybe I was ghosting him already. But by the second night, his tone completely changed. "You could at least answer me," he said in one voicemail. "After everything I've done for you, this is pretty messed up." I blocked his number after that because I didn't know what to say. Then for 2 days I heard nothing, and I started hoping maybe he got the message and moved on. But around midnight on the third night, somebody started pounding on my door. I knew it was him, and he kept banging on the door and yelling my name. Then he shouted, "You think you can just ignore me? Open the damn door." I stayed completely silent and called the police from my bedroom. I whispered everything I knew. Then I tried to stay quiet again. Then I heard another apartment door open and somebody in the hallway yelled at him to leave. Greg started shouting back at them too. A few minutes later, the police arrived and I finally heard his voice farther down the hallway, arguing with them. One officer knocked on my door after they took him outside. They asked if I wanted to file a report, and I told them everything, including what I found online about him. The officer said they warned him not to come back and told me to call immediately if I saw him again. I moved apartments about 2 months later because I couldn't relax there anymore after that night. The thing that still bothers me is that he didn't look dangerous. He looked successful and charming and well put together. Before this happened, I thought I was a pretty good judge of character, but now I don't even know. I've probably ignored a lot of good people because of that. Hey everyone, I hope you enjoyed those stories, and if you did, please leave a like or comment. I would love to hear from you. And if you want to share your stories, a link below in the description takes you to my Reddit site. I would love to narrate them on the channel. And with that said, stay depraved.